Okay, here's where we stand at the start of turn 8. I've kind of skipped ahead a couple turns in terms of my videos. Instead of doing a video recap for each turn, I am now doing video recaps as I feel like it. This is a very long game. I'm now only halfway through, not quite halfway through. Fortunately, the past 2 turns have been fairly quick. I haven't had any extensions, no ties that extended the command points, so they progressed through pretty quickly. But I did have a couple of big, beefy command point impulses, though. I think I had like a 9 command point impulse, which is pretty rare. It's much more common to get 1 or 2 command point impulses, but sometimes you do get those outliers. Some changes here kind of in the right side of the French line. So the Army of Alsace, which is originally kind of trapped over here, has made its way, abandoned Strasbourg and made its way over to relink with the Army of the Rhine. But as you can see, they've kind of pushed, they're here, this is the city of Nancy, underneath there. And that's kind of been the focal point of their defense here. What happened is the Prussian Third Army succeeded in taking the fort at Pfalzburg here and pushed this way into the French position. The French had created some field fortifications there, and that resulted in a series of fruitless attacks by the Prussian Third Army. Fruitless and fairly damaging attacks, especially because the French, even though they may have gotten demoralized or even double demoralized by the powerful Prussian artillery, were so dominant on the battle impact roll because they had the +6 modifier for all their division leaders, and then they had a +2 for artillery. They would usually be at either 7 or 9 DRM on the battle impact table, which is almost always going to get them to a situation where all of their demoralizations are removed. Whereas the Prussians, on the other hand, usually have a -1 for their total division commanders because all their division commanders are 0s or -1s. I think it balanced out to like a -1 total. They end up with battle failures or no effect, or you can retreat a couple extra hexes. They end up with the weaker battle impact results that don't allow them to remove those demoralizations. So what happened was I rather foolishly on one of my turns attacked into Nancy with the Third Army on my last with some of my last IP and CP of the impulse. So what that resulted in was a loss for the Third Army and a demoralization result. The French got a battle impact result that removed all of their demoralizations, and they went second for that impulse, which allowed them to counterattack into a demoralized Prussian army. That's not good for the Prussians. If the Prussians can attack a demoralized French force, that's very good because the demoralization effect halves your divisional commander tactical bonuses, which essentially reduces them to 0 for the French if they're a +1. And I don't think I have any currently that are +2. I think they're all +1. So that can really impact the French battle impact DRM. For the French attacking into a demoralized Prussian army, it was effective because it gave them a column shift, which the Prussians would get that too if they attack a demoralized force. So that put them on the 2-to-1 column. So what this means is the French hit the demoralized Prussian stack and forced them back. So as you can see here, whereas the Prussians originally were pushing Nancy and pushing the French line over into this direction, which was kind of good because I was trying to reunite the Army of Alsace. What happened is that 2 fruitless attacks by the Prussians left their corps weakened, so the French actually counterattacked out of Nancy and into this hex, further demoralizing the Prussians, further reducing their strength. Prussians end up building a field fortification here, so what I did with the French was actually retreated them back to Nancy and built a field fortification there. So the French are kind of continuing to play on this defensive strategy, and what's happening now is kind of what Cannondale ran into, which is the Prussian army is having a real difficult time hitting the French with those powerful battle impact tactical ratings that the French have, and especially then if the French are in field fortifications, that's an additional -3 to the Prussian battle impact result, whereas the French, getting a +6 or whatever. Not a +6, I guess a plus, well, sometimes +6. You can get that high because they're getting that +3 for their field fortifications plus a +1 for tactical ratings and a +2 for reroll ratings. So the French are getting these huge battle impact modifiers, and the Prussians are getting hammered with these negatives because they're constantly attacking. So that's what the French want, is for the Prussians to keep attacking out of these fortified positions. But the French will counterattack like I did, where I can take advantage of a demoralized Prussian stack, because that will kind of help them offset the superior Prussian artillery. And so really the problems for the Prussians started with all of the sieging going on. I've got all these forts that I really need to take. Metz and Strasbourg are worth 10 victory points at the end of the game combined, so those are worthwhile to siege. So that's what I did, but they take a lot of strength points, so you're tying up whole armies or numerous corps sieging each of these fortresses. When you do that, you can't, your mobility is gone, and that allows the French to sit here and just rebuild their corps, and they have a lot more corps than the Prussians, and build fortifications. It creates this World War I sort of trench line that's very difficult for the Prussians to move, especially given the advantages the French have in terms of command capability. So it's going to be tough for the Prussians. What they do have now is the siege at Strasbourg is finished at the start of this turn. So this frees up the entire 4th Army, which is a big army. It's not as big as the 3rd Army, but it is big. And I think what I'm going to do is have them explore this southern route, which I've already gotten a start on by sieging and taking this fort at Schlettstadt. They're going to make a move on Belfort down here, which is your southern route to the rail line to Paris. So, and the French have no good answer for this. Their 2 armies currently, they have 3 now. They did build the Army of Paris over here. But they have 3 armies versus the 4 Prussian armies. And just like in Victory Games Civil War, that gives the Prussians a little bit more flexibility in terms of how they're maneuvering. So this 4th Army can start to swing down the southern route. Now this is going to suck up 4 more turns to siege Belfort. But once they get it, it opens up this real big avenue that the French have no good way of defending, because the bulk of their armies are creating a line up here that the Prussians can keep hammering at and taking losses, yes, but it's also tying up these French forces while this other army comes around the south. So we're going to see if that works. The problem is that we're halfway through the game, so the Prussians are kind of running out of time. Do they have 4 or 5 turns to burn on Belfort? If they, say it takes them 4 turns to get Belfort, and that's, if they ace their rolls every time, that's only going to leave them 5 more turns to get to Paris and take it, and they're just not going to be able to do that because Paris itself is going to take 5 or 6 turns. This is probably something I'll cover in my review, but one of the weaknesses of the game is that it ends when the game, that ends at the historical period. So, I guess the criteria there is you're looking for, can you do better than the Germans did historically? And if you can, then you end it before the Germans did historically. But that doesn't leave any possibility of, well, can you still win even if you take longer than the Germans did historically? The game kind of assumes that if you can't do it as quickly as the Germans did historically, then it's a loss. So, which a lot of games do that, but it kind of, limits your ability to kind of explore and test strategies and so forth. So, you know, the Prussians are probably doomed here, but you know, I did sort of wanted to explore some of these more creative possibilities of, you know, what if there was a southern route? What if you did take the time to siege a lot of these forts? And so sieges take so long in this game, and you have to siege every fort, even if it's empty, for the Prussians, that it becomes you know, a very big strain on their resources and certainly on the speed of their advance. So anyway, that's where we are at the start of turn 8. It's just been kind of slow for the Prussians, and they've been counterattacked pretty successfully here right in the middle. You know, now that they've freed up an army here, we'll see what happens. And plus Metz is about to fall. That'll free the first army up again. So will they be able to start making some headway against these French corps, some of which are largely reserve infantry?